Would you? I had planned to slow walk us through this, but we're here. And I want to learn the process that brings young Christina Li, because you've described yourself as a shy and fearful child. Now you're on this podcast. You've also said that you were reluctant to embrace the culture of your Chinese American immigrant family, is how you phrased it.
Yes.
So what changed, and when did it change that you're at least enough over your shyness that you're here, and that you've written a book about your about someone's Chinese American immigrant family?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was an incredibly shy child. I was the kind of kid that we had like these popcorn reading kind of exercises in school where you like read and then you'd like pass it on to the kid behind you. And I was so scared that I would plan out my like lines. So I would be prepared to say my one line when it got to me. Like it was just like those levels of like childhood anxiety. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I was always, you know, on the shyer side. And as a result, I kind of probably turned to books. Those are probably correlated. And I loved kind of escaping in the pages of a book. I loved reading stories. I read through the shelves of my local library. I had the best childhood librarian ever. And so, I mean, I was reading those books, but I wasn't seeing myself in those books. I was reading narratives about other people who didn't really look like me and who didn't really kind of come from my background. And so it was very kind of, it was like spectating. It was kind of very passive reading. But then when I was, I think in, fifth or sixth grade or something, I read Grace Lin's Where the Mountain Meets the Moon. And that is kind of the reason why I love kind of having, you know, narratives in children's literature that kind of are diverse and have diverse representation, just because that book was life-changing for me. I mean, it was the first book that I'd read that had a character of kind of Asian descent and someone who was the main character. And reading that book and seeing Grace Lin's picture on the back cover, it really made me think like, like these are characters who look like me and who, you know, whose culture I can really relate to. And she's front and center, like she's the main character, she's the hero of this story. And not only that, but you know, here is a Chinese American author writing these stories. And so after I read that book, it just something clicked in me. I think I started, you know, reading more books and I started writing novels. And from that point on, I mean, it's a long process kind of overcoming, you know, childhood fearfulness and overcoming, you know, your shyness and finding a voice. But that really was the beginning of it all. And that kind of was the book that inspired me to want to become an author.
Wouldn't it be great if, like a movie, you could identify the one pivotal moment, the one scene that before this, fearful, afterward, not so much?
Yeah, I mean, it was much more gradual, I think, than my like 30-second kind of explanation of this whole thing. But it really was, I mean, I could very like vividly remember like where I was when I read that book, and like kind of like everything that was going around me at that time. It really was kind of that pivotal moment, even if things took a little longer to kind of develop before and after.
Let me ask you this question for any publishers who might be listening. After you read Grace Lin's book, did you say, my God, wonderful, breathtaking, that'll do, that's all we need of that voice, let's go back to standard heterosexual white people fiction from here on out? Or was there a yearning for more?
Yeah, so I mean, it was an entire paradigm shift, right? Like before that, I didn't even register that that people like me could become the main character. I mean, it sounds silly now because because I'm writing books with like Asian American main characters, but at that point I truly was like, oh, like this is possible. Like you could have someone who's Chinese in a book, like you could have books with like Chinese characters. And so that was just, it took a while for me to wrap my head around that. And after that, I kind of, like after I was exposed to that, I was looking for that everywhere I went. I mean, I loved furthermore, like reading Melinda Lo and like Cindy Pond's YA when I got older, and then kind of reading even more like middle grade and YA that had Asian American characters or characters of Asian descent. I just wanted kind of more. I mean, I read Grace Lin's book and I was like, this is a wonderful book. Like, first of all, I want more Grace Lin's books, but also I want more books with like characters who are Asian and have, you know, a variety of Asian perspectives. Yeah, I'm in a writing class at in my school. And one of the things we talked about today was about how Asian stories and Asian American stories are not necessarily monolith. And so, I mean, I loved her book, but I also wanted other books that, you know, touched on a variety of topics. And so, yeah, I'm glad that over the years it has gotten a little bit more diverse, but I would still love to see kind of even more like books with like Asian main characters coming out in the future.
That is something I've heard several authors on this show say, and several authors on other shows. Don't worry about those shows, esteemed audience. This is the only show you need. I know when Hina Khan is most recently, I'm thinking of when she was here, she almost, she had her own very similar experience in that she would write about, I think she said she would write about white characters initially before she felt comfortable writing about her own family and her own culture. Mm-hmm. I think that has become just a universal issue that hopefully is going to be stamped out. One of the things that Clues to the Universe is going to be stamping out in addition to ignorance is that feeling of isolation, hopefully, for readers. What do you imagine that if this book had been available at your awesome library when you were growing up? I want to know what made the library so awesome, but what would Clues to the Universe have offered you, and what are you hoping that it's going to offer to readers who are picking it up now?
Yeah. So I mean, I was lucky enough to have the best like middle school librarian in the whole world. She bought every single book that we requested and had these like long PowerPoint slideshows about books that she was recommending. I think she read like a book a day. She was incredible. Like, I dedicated part of the book to her in the acknowledgements just because she was so influential on my decision or my ability to become an author. But I think that, I wrote this book as a love letter to kind of Asian American kids and put in little things that I would have loved reading in a book when I was a kid. And first of all, I mean, this is a book about kind of, like you said, like isolation and solidarity and friendship and overcoming kind of the growing pains of growing up in middle school and overcoming grief and everything. And so it would have provided Shy Christina with a really, hopefully heartwarming friendship story. But moreover, I think I put in those little like Easter eggs that that reminded me of my childhood. I mean, it's really small details. It's, the food that they eat, kind of, I put in my like fair share of Chinese pastries in there because I love Chinese pastries. Like the like small like nicknames, Rose's mother calls her. Her mother calls her Bobo, which is like a nickname for like treasure, like my little treasure essentially. And so I hope that if I were a kid and I was reading this, back, way back when, little Christina in that library, I hoped I could have seen myself and been able to kind of relate to the things that were happening in the book and seen a character who kind of was like me and had, the same cultural background that I did. So I really hoped it could give kids kind of, Chinese American kids, like make them feel seen, but also hopefully it feels like a hug, essentially. I think that's what I've said I wanted my book to feel like.
I love that. I think every book's a little bit of a hug, but yeah. I love the idea of a very specific hug. Oh, Christina Li saw me.
yeah, exactly. My brand of hug.
Am I talking to you early enough in the process that you've heard back from any earlier readers yet?
Yeah. So one of my favorite things ever, I mean, I like, it's just hearing back from people who've read my book, especially like it means so much to me when it's, early readers who've read it and like, they've like, I don't really read my reviews. I think the book more so belongs to kind of the public. It belongs to the world now. And I'm not really a part of that, but sometimes people write nice reviews and tag me in them on Twitter, which is really, really heartwarming because I've heard reviews in which people, some Asian American readers are like, this was so like, I felt so close to this book essentially, and readers who kind of, related to kind of also the friendship component. It was like, this book is a very specific narrative, but I think it really touches on the universal themes of friendship and finding your best friend and overcoming grief and making people feel less lonely. And I think it really resonated with some early readers. And I'm really glad that I've been able to kind of read really, really nice words so far.